Remember the world you grew up in. For decades, one truth seemed unshakable: America was at the center of it all. From the movies we watched to the dollars in our pockets, American influence was the air we breathed. But look around you. Can you feel it? The ground is shifting. That old certainty is cracking, and what's emerging is a world far more complex, far more unpredictable, and for many, far more unsettling. What happens when the world's superpower is no longer the only power? What happens when the American dream is no longer the only dream? This isn't just a news headline. This is the story of our lifetime. And it's a story that will define your future. Let's rewind the clock. After the Cold War, the United States stood alone. It was the end of history, a unipolar moment where American political ideals, economic models, and military might were unparalleled. This was the era of American certainty. The U.S. wrote the rules, led the alliances, and acted as the world's policeman. It wasn't always perfect, but there was a predictable order. But empires rise, and they also change. The seeds of a new world were being sown, often in the very shadow of American dominance. Two key events acted as massive accelerants. First, the 2008 financial crisis. It wasn't just a Wall Street problem. It was a global earthquake that shattered the myth of America's infallible economic stewardship. Countries around the world watched as the system, championed by the U.S., nearly collapsed. Suddenly, they began to question their reliance on the dollar and look for alternative models. The crisis exposed a vulnerability that many thought was impossible. Confidence, once lost, is incredibly hard to regain. The second accelerator was the prolonged wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. These conflicts, which stretched over 2 decades, drained trillions of dollars and cost countless lives. More than that, they drained America's moral authority and its appetite for global intervention. The images from Abu Ghraib, the endless cycle of violence, and the chaotic withdrawal from Kabul painted a picture not of a confident superpower, but of a weary giant questioning its own purpose and capabilities. The world watched, and the message was clear: America's power had limits. As America was looking inward, another giant was rising with astonishing speed. China's economic miracle is the story of the 21st century. It lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, becoming the world's factory and a technological powerhouse. But this wasn't just about cheap goods. Beijing began to flex its muscles on the global stage, offering a different path. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, it poured trillions into infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and even Europe, building bridges, ports, and railways. For many developing nations, China offered what the West often didn't: massive investment with fewer political strings attached. This wasn't just economics, it was a direct challenge to the U.S.-led order. China presented an alternative model: state-led capitalism and authoritarian governance that delivered results. The ideological battle, once thought won by democracy, was suddenly back on. And it's not just China. Look at the rise of regional powers. India, with its massive population and booming tech sector, is charting its own course, balancing relationships with both the U.S. and Russia. Brazil, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, these are not just client states anymore. They have their own ambitions, their own alliances, and they are increasingly willing to say no to Washington. They operate in a multipolar world where they can play superpowers off against each other to their own advantage. This new diplomatic landscape is messy, complex, and doesn't follow the old rulebook. The very tools of American power are also being challenged. The U.S. dollar has been the world's reserve currency for generations, giving America immense economic leverage. But now, countries like Russia, China, and others are actively working to de-dollarize, trading in their own currencies to bypass U.S. sanctions and influence. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is expanding and exploring the creation of a common currency. It's a slow process, but the direction is clear: a direct assault on one of the core pillars of American global control. Then there's the cultural front. For years, Hollywood, McDonald's, and blue jeans were symbols of a desirable, modern life. American soft power was immense, but today, the world is more culturally diverse than ever. K-pop from South Korea dominates global music charts. Turkish dramas are watched by hundreds of millions. Nollywood, Nigeria's film industry, is one of the largest in the world. People now have countless cultural options. The American dream is no longer the only aspirational story being told. So, what does this mean for you? For us, it means a more volatile world. Without a single, dominant power to enforce rules, regional conflicts could escalate more easily, economic competition will be fiercer. The global internet could splinter into different blocks, with a Western internet, a Chinese internet, and others a splinternet. The certainties our parents and grandparents knew are gone. But this isn't necessarily a doomsday scenario. A world with multiple centers of power could also be a world with more diverse solutions to global problems like climate change and pandemics. It could force nations to rely more on diplomacy and cooperation rather than unilateral force. It could lead to a more balanced and, some would argue, a more just global system where more voices are heard. The era of American certainty is over. We are now living in the age of global uncertainty. This isn't a story about America's decline into irrelevance. The U.S. remains an unparalleled military and economic force. But it is now a story about America learning to share the stage. The challenge for the United States is to adapt to move from being the world's director to being a leading actor in a much larger ensemble cast. And the challenge for all of us is to understand this new, complex world we're living in, because the old maps no longer work. We are the explorers of this new era, and the future is an unwritten script. Thank you for watching. If this video made you think, please hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think the future holds?